Hey guys, so what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to give you guys a little run through of XNormal, just to supplement the little tutorial we did today in class in the game development project. I will be going through this again with you guys in class um, when we cover the rocks, and hopefully we'll be able to get it all done. But the reason I'm doing this now is just in case we run out of time, that you guys have something that you can refer to, and and you can always come back to this video. So we're just going to go through a basic run through of XNormal and how to generate a whole bunch of really useful maps that can give us some really great detail in our models very early on, and allow us to get a really good base for texturing and doing a diffuse map. So what we're going to do first is what I have here is this rock that I sculpted in ZBrush, and I sculpted this sometime last year. So what I did was I just simply, you should know how to do this by now, is just simply go to Z plugin, hit the preprocess current button once you're done sculpting, of course, and you'll want to save before you do this step. Preprocess current, when you hit the preprocess current button, it's going to process your mesh to see where the most efficient decimation and reduction of polygons is going to be, and then once it's done that process, you're going to hit the decimate current button, and it's going to reduce your polygon count. Now I already did this, and before I did the step, it was at 5 million polygons, and now it's at 1 million. So, and then you simply just hit your export button, and then you would export your rock as OBJ. You might want to call it something like high or something like that, just so you know what it is. And yeah, that's the steps. And we're going to go through the techniques I used in sculpting this rock together in class, but this is solely just an XNormal tutorial. So back in Max, I have the rock that I just imported. I imported the high version. I also have a low poly version of the rock. I'm just gonna show that to you guys right here. I have a low poly version of the rock that I took the high poly in ZBrush, and I used ZRemesher to get something I could work with a little bit better. So it has pretty good topology, and I think it looks okay. So let's just go ahead, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to export the low poly version. So I'm going to just go just want to go export selected, and I should create a folder for all these new things that we're going to create. So I'm just going to call this rock tutorial, and I'm just going to save that as an OBJ. I'm just going to call it rock low, just so we know what it is. Just going to hit save, and just going to export that, and that's done. I'm just going to do the same for the high poly. So just going to unhide the high poly, select it, and I'm just going to go export selected, and we'll just call this high. And it's going to take a little bit of it's going to take a while to export that, since we are working with so many polygons here. I'm just going to wait while it exports the normals. Okay, almost there, and done. Okay, so just before we get into XNormal, I just want to show you the low poly here. So I've unwrapped the low poly already, and I just want to show you the unwraps really quick. Oops, don't want to twist it. So what I did when I was determining the seams, I used just pull this out here. I used the Pell mapping, and I just set some seams and stuff here. When you're doing any sort of unwrapping, you want to put your seams in a smart place. So what I did was I put them in between rock cracks, just so the seams won't be as noticeable. Any areas in here will be rendered dark because of the AO, so just be smart about where you put your seams. So that's what my unwraps look like, and I'm also just going to go and copy my unwraps to channel 2 just so we have light maps for this object. I'm just going to hit the move button to copy it over, and that's done. And we're going to go back into XNormal now. So this is XNormal. A few of you already have used this and already know how to use it. So these tabs on the side is pretty much where you're going to do your work in XNormal, and where you're going to input your meshes, and when you're going to get all your baking options and stuff like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to click on the high definition meshes button, and to load a mesh in here, all you simply have to do is just right click and add meshes. So I'm just going to go add meshes. I'm going to go find the high poly, put it in there. So now your high poly's in there. You can see the location of it, and it's checked off, so it's checked up as visible. Now what you can do here is you can input multiple meshes. So if you need to do multiple bakes of different versions of a high poly to get different maps, you can do that, and we're going to do that as together. We're going to do 2 versions of the high poly, and we're going to get a really good we're going to combine 2 different ambient occlusions to get a really good ambient occlusion map, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So we have our high poly in there. Now we're going to right click and add our low poly, and so now you should have your high poly, and you click on the low definition meshes, you just see your low poly in there. So I'm just going to go into baking options here, and this is where you bake all your maps out of. So right now normal map is checked off by default, and for the sake of this tutorial and rendering and stuff, we're just going to keep it at 1024 by 1024, and we're going to keep it everything else pretty much default. Something to be aware of is you have this edge padding, and edge padding is you know, just like the padding in 3ds Max, and right now it's set to a default of 16. I find it's a little bit too high, but we're just going to leave it for now. So what we're going to use is we're going to use the renderer. We have 3 different renderers here, and some of these are experimental. Some of them are really good for ambient occlusion, but the default bucket renderer is good for normal maps. You also have an anti-aliasing drop-down, and this is going to determine how, you know, you want really good anti-aliasing on your maps, especially a normal map. So I'm going to leave it at 4x, and 4x, of course, the higher you go, the longer it's going to take to render. So if you have a fast computer, it shouldn't be a problem, but just be aware that that's your anti-aliasing options. You always want the best quality map. So we're just going to check on normal map, and up here in the output files where we're going to put our output, and we're just going to name it. So I'm going to name this normal map, and I'm just going to hit save, and then we're ready to go. So I'm just going to hit, once you're ready, once you have your map checked off, and we're going to go through some of these other maps here, but first, the first thing you want to do is render out a normal map just to make sure that everything is okay. If you need to go back and fix things, you can always do that, but for now we're just going to check on normal map, and we're just going to hit generate map, and you're going to get the preview. It's going to run through and render it for you. At this stage is where you want to see if you have any errors, if you need to re-render or anything like that. So it's always good to start off with the normal map first. And we got a pretty clean normal map, and you can see that the edge padding is automatically generated for you. There are a few areas that I think could be a little bit better. You can see a few errors here and there. So I'm just going to close that, and if you see any errors like that where you think your the cage is your mesh is penetrating through the cage, you can edit that, and I'll show you quickly how to do that. We're going to get more into the 3D viewer later on in the classes and stuff like that, but right now I'm just going to show you a very basic fix. If you notice anything penetrating or a really ugly normal map, you can do some stuff to fix it. So we're just going to hit 3D viewer, and what we're going to do is we're just going to hit launch viewer, and it's going to go and launch the viewer. So you can see it loading the maps in the bottom corner there, or loading the meshes. And there we go. So a little bit hard to see at first. So you have these options here to show different things, so you can actually click on and show your normals. For now, let's just, you can hide or unhide the high poly or low poly mesh. we're just going to keep them on, both of them on. And you can do stuff like increase the light intensity and GI and all that kind of stuff. Maybe change the lighting color to something a little bit brighter. And it didn't really do anything. So anyways, what you want to do here, and what I'm going to show you is you can click on this little show cage button, and it's just going to show you your cage. And you can see that the cage could use a little bit of work. You can see the high poly mesh is penetrating through. So just to be on the safe side, what you want to do if you want to edit the cage, if you want to expand it, is you have this little global extrusion slider, and you can just slide that out. If you let go, if you slide all the way and you let go, and you still see some things penetrating through, you can just slide it out again until you have nothing penetrating through your mesh. Now that should give us a little bit of a better bake. We have this area here where you know, it still didn't penetrate through. And if you need to edit individual vertices, what you can do is you can just click on the middle mouse button, the wheel. Before you do that, is you want to check this edit cage button on, and that'll allow you to edit the cage, and just click on the middle mouse button. I'm not sure what the hotkey is for selecting multiple vertices, but you can select one of the vertices, and you can just do selection extrusion, and you can move that, or you can move it with these selection sliders back and forth, or left and right, or up and down, and that's how you affect individual vertices. So you can see there that we fixed that, and it's no longer penetrating through. So once you're done, what you want to do is just hit save meshes, and it doesn't matter, just save it somewhere. And we're just going to say yes. I'm just going to say mesh is saved. So now our cage is edited, and we're going to close out the 3D viewer just by hitting escape. And now we're back. And you can see that that's saved there. So now go back to baking options, and we're just going to re-render that normal map. And we're just going to say OK, overwrite. And it fixed a few of the errors. There's still some places where it's a little bit weird, but I think that was because of my sculpt. So we're pretty happy with that. And so now we have a normal map. So in addition to a normal map, you also have what's called a bent normal map. And a bent normal map is a object space normal map. So it's a normal map with all the different funky colors. And it's a very useful map because we can get some really good lighting information out of that, and add that to our rocks and stuff like that. So to fake some lighting, you may or may not want to use this. It's up to you. But I'm just going to show you what that does. I'm just going to check on the bent normal map option. I'm just going to save that. And we're going to call that object space. And just hit save, and let's just render that. You can see the difference between this map and a regular normal map is that every single direction has a different color. So this is more used for, it was used in the old days of gaming for like static objects. Those objects that never move and had baked lighting, they would use this type of normal map. So, but it's very useful actually in getting lighting direction and it actually shows you what direction the normals are pointing in relation to world space, or object space, sorry. So we're just going to render that out. It's a very funky looking map. And good, so we got that map. Now we're ready to render our ambient occlusion, and the method I'm going to show you guys right now is great for doing stuff like you know, if you want to do a more cartoony rock, or if you want to add some really nice detail in your ambient occlusion, so that your rocks pick up some excellent looking detail. So we're just going to check on the ambient occlusion button, and for this, this is going to be called, this is just going to be we're going to do two ambient occlusions. We're going to do a regular ambient occlusion, and we're going to do what's called a hemisphere ambient occlusion. This is a technique that some artists use. So we're going to combine those two ambient occlusions in Photoshop and get a really nice ambient occlusion. So first, we're going to just do the regular ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion takes a really long time to render, so for the normal ambient occlusion, we're just going to change the renderer to OpenRL render, and now this is a very fast renderer, and it does a very good job. XNormal does a really good job at creating ambient occlusion maps, and so you notice that the anti-aliasing actually unchecked, so it actually does a really good job of anti-aliasing without actually having to change any of these settings. So I'm just going to go up here and change this to ambient. We'll just call it AO normal, just so we know what it is. Or normal's kind of confusing. Let's call it ambient AO1, and we're just going to hit render. And we're just going to wait while that renders. And you can see that it's actually very, very quick. You can see my modeling errors there are pretty apparent, so you want to make sure that you don't have any errors like that. This is due to intersection from the decimation, so you gotta watch out for stuff like that. And now we've got our ambient occlusion, so we can close that out. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to max, and we're gonna we're gonna set up our high poly to render out our second ambient occlusion, which is gonna be called the ambient occlusion hemisphere. So let's just go back to max here, and we're just gonna work with our high poly again. Here's our beautiful high poly mesh. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, oops, make sure you're working in the right layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sphere, oops, sphere. Make sure I'm in the right layer here. Oh, sorry, I'm working in the wrong layer there. Just make sure you're working in the right layer. And we're going to create a sphere, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the upper half of the sphere. So we have a hemisphere. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click object properties and backface call, just so we can see that the normals, we can see our normals, and we can see that what direction our normals are facing. So right now they're outside, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a normal modifier on there just to flip the normals on the inside, and I'm going to position the sphere, if I go into front view, just to get it about halfway through the object like that. And so what this is going to do is it's going to change our ambient occlusion. It's going to give us a little bit of shadowing on the bottom of our rocks, so it's going to look really nice and really 3D looking. So I'm going to actually attach my high poly to the hemisphere. So now we have this set up here, and I'm going to just click on that, and I'm going to export this. I'm going to call it rock high and underscore hemi for the hemisphere. And we're just going to hit export, and we're going to wait again while that exports. Now this method here is really good for how, again, like I said earlier, you're going to notice a difference in the AO. It's going to create a darker shadow on the bottom of the rocks than a normal AO would. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine the first ambient occlusion that we created with the second ambient occlusion, and it's going to give us a really nice look. So this method here is very, very good for if you wanted to do like hand painted stuff, and you wanted to get that nice hand painted look to your objects. It's especially good for like characters and stuff like that. So it's a really great method to keep in mind. I'm just gonna wait while those render, and we're just gonna hit done. Okay, so let's go back to XNormal, and now we're gonna go back to high definition meshes, because we're gonna actually change the high poly mesh to the hemisphere mesh. So instead of having to delete this and all that stuff, simply just uncheck it so that it's not going to render this high poly mesh. And we're just going to add meshes and find our hemi. We're going to add it in there. So now if we go back to our baking options, our first high poly object is unchecked and invisible, and our second high poly object is visible. We're going to go back to baking options, back to ambient occlusion, and this time for this one we don't want to use the OpenRL map renderer because we want to have the other method's going to take a little bit longer to render, but it is going to give us a really nice shadows and stuff like that. So we're going to go back to default, and for the sake of this tutorial, just for the sake of speed, I'm going to leave it at 1x, but when you do this at home, you definitely want to take the time and render it at 4x. So we're just going to leave it at 1x, and we're going to call this AO Hemi. Save that, and we're just going to generate map. And you can see already that we're getting quite a different ambient occlusion here. We're getting much darker shadows on the bottom of the rocks. I'm going to close that out, and let's just go back to Photoshop. Just go to Photoshop, and I already did a version of this earlier, so I'm going to just close all these maps out. I'm going to start again from scratch. Okay, so I'm just going to start a file here, and we're going to go find our different maps. We're going to just start with the normal map. Just going to create a folder here. I'm just going to call this normal. I spelled it wrong, but it's okay. And we're going to also start an AO folder. Oops, not a layer, folder. And let's just open those AO maps up. So we're going to open up both of them and compare them. So here we have the ambient occlusion with the hemisphere, so it's showing a little bit darker on the bottom. And you can see the difference between the two. So first I'm going to bring over the normal AO. I'm just going to put it in that folder. Can you get the other AO? I'm just going to put it in there. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to take this Hemi AO, and I'm going to just drop down the opacity down to about 40. And you can see that it combines the two in a pretty cool way. So we have this lower shadow in combination with our regular AO. And so what I'm also going to render another map. It's called a convexed. Oops, sorry. Convexity map, and we're going to render this convexity map, and what it's going to do is it's just going to give us a little bit more detail in our AO. So I'm just going to check that, and this one I'm going to make 4x, and we're just going to call this, it's kind of like a cavity map, so we're just going to call it cavity. Save, and let's just render out that map. And so this map here is going to render out pink, and we're going to take the red channel from this map and combine it with the other AO. Okay, so it renders out pink, and it renders all the little crevices and cracks and stuff like that. So let's just open up that. Okay, so we have our convexity map here, and we're just going to go into the red channel and find, so you can see that it did a pretty good job at finding all the little cracks and all that stuff. So this is actually called the cavity map. So in your channels, I'm just going to go and Alt A to select all, Control C to copy into the clipboard, and we're going to go back to our master file here, I'm just going to put it in there and just set this to multiply. And you can see the difference that this makes. It actually gives your AO a lot more detail. So you can see quite the big difference by having a nice convexity map here. So already we have a really good start for a diffuse map for our rock. So let's also open up that object space normal map that we did. So here's our object space normal map. We're going to go into the channels, and if you just click through the channels, you can see that each channel, so the red channel represents a different direction in light. So in this case, it's a light coming from, like, say, the left or the right side of the rock. And in our green channel, it's coming directly from the top of the rock. So the green channel is a good map to have for top-down lighting. So we're just going to grab that, Control A, Control C. And we're going to paste that in there as well. Let's try multiply and see what happens. So just by adding multiply, it's going to create this nice fake lighting, which is, I think, really cool. I think it looks a little bit too dark, so I might just brighten it up a bit. Just a touch. And I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit too. So you can see what the difference that map makes. So our rock is already looking like it's made out of clay, which is really cool. Now it's cool. You can set this entire. So we have all our AOs here in this group, in this folder, and what you can do is you can actually set the entire folder to multiply, and now it'll just multiply everything in that folder to whatever's underneath it. So at this point, it's probably good to start another folder called diffuse. Click OK, and we're just going to go find a rock texture. And you want to find something that contains no lighting or no lighting information, and doesn't have much shadow to it as well. So you want to find something that's relatively flat looking. I'm looking at tileable rock textures right now, and you want to find something that's really flat looking for a good base. You don't want to find something with too much detail in it, and something like this looks like it might be good. Actually, there's too many little pebbles in there. I might not like that one. So it's more of a ground texture, so let's look for something we got here. This one looks like it's a good one, so let's take that and copy it, and I'm just going to put that into diffuse channel, and of course it's way too big, so we want to definitely scale that down just so our details are to scale. And you can see already that we got a pretty good looking rock just by barely doing anything to it. So I'm just going to tile this up here. And we have these seams here, so you'll want to definitely paint out any seams with your clone brush. And already we have a pretty nice looking rock, so let's just save this out as diffuse. Just gonna call this diffuse map, and let's just hit save. And let's just go back to max and apply that to the low poly, so we don't need the high poly anymore. Now we have our low poly mesh here. And we're going to actually check this the way it looks in UDK or UE4. I don't really trust the viewport that much. So whenever you're testing maps, bring it into UE4 just to make sure it's looking how it's supposed to be looking. So I'm just going to plug in the diffuse here. Apply that to the rock. the diffuse is looking on the rock with the ambient occlusion stuff. It's looking like it's going to look pretty good. And I'm just going to plug in the normal map. Of course, you want to change this to 100. Normal bump, and we're going to plug in that normal map. You can see how it's looking. So it's looking already pretty good out of the box. Just make sure that this stupid gamma correction is off. Okay. And we didn't really make a spec map for it, so we'll want to do that at some point, make a proper spec map for it, but maybe we can do that now. I'm just going to find, for the spec map, you don't want to use the same diffuse texture as your spec map. You want to find something else. Let's find something with some good contrast, with some interesting details on it that we can add here. Maybe something like this has some interesting details to it. I'm just going to create a new folder. Oops. Folder called spec. I'm going to copy the old diffuse map in there, and I'm just going to paste the other one in. So this is going to be used as our spec map. I'm just going to darken it. Something like that should work well. I'll just multiply it on top of the other one, or just leave it at normal. Call this spec. I'm not sure how this is going to look, so probably like crap. Now when you're making a spec map, make sure that you leave your AO on, because you don't want the shadowed areas to receive any AO. And maybe we'll just turn off this hemisphere here, and we'll just call this spec map. Okay, so now we have all our maps, and we're back to Max, and I'm just going to plug in that spec map in there. Okay. So we have some pretty shiny looking rocks here. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to export it. Export selected. And we're just going to save this as an FBX. And we'll just call this rock. So make sure your smoothing groups are on. Make sure preserve edge orientations on, and you want to check on embed media just to make sure the textures go with it to UE4. And then that's it. So now let's take a look at how it's going to look in UE4. So I'm just going to launch UE4 here. Launch the engine. And I already put a rock in there before, but we're going to just create a blank project here. Just going to get rid of all this junk, just so I have a clean base. And I'm going to import that into the game. So just make sure that import materials and import texture is checked on, and I'm just going to import. Okay, so it looks like all our maps besides our spec map got imported. Just drag the rock in there. So by default it's looking pretty good. A little bit shiny, but let's bring in our spec map. So to bring in a map or a model or something, just right click and just go import. And I'm just going to plug my spec in there. Let's open the material. So we've got our base color, we've got our normal map. I'm just going to drag the spec in here, plug that into specular. You can see our specs looking kind of. So let's just go ahead and build lighting. So we can see our spec working in there a little bit. If you double click on your static mesh here in the details panel, we're just going to set the light map to a higher resolution, so let's just do 128 just for fun. I'm just going to hit save. I'm going to put it down to the ground a little bit. Just build lighting again. So it's looking pretty good. There's definitely more I could have done to this with in terms of the diffuse map, but for now I think it looks okay. Also, might want to throw a skylight in there just to see, and we're just going to build again. The skylight's going to give us some nice light from the sky, and it's going to actually take some blue values from the skybox and stuff like that and add it to your rock. So we have a pretty good looking rock here already. One of the great things about doing a rock like this is that you can make it modular. So if I'm just Control C, Control V and copy it, you can create things like platforms. And this is how we generally do it in games, is that we'll intersect different rock assets like this. And you can rotate them. And we can do stuff like create rock walls and all kinds of fun stuff. You can put some of them higher like this and create little platforms. Just bunches of rocks. And rotate them so they're not all looking the same, and build lighting again, see how that looks. And cool, so it's going to give us some nice AO between the cracks and stuff like that, and it's going to make it look pretty natural. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this XNormal tutorial and a little bit of setup in Unreal. So what you can also do, I didn't mention this before, is you can go in Photoshop. I'm just going to turn off spec here, and if you want, you can actually change the color of the AO. So if I go into layer, add a new adjustment layer, I'm just going to put hue and saturation in there, and going to just check on colorize, and it's going to colorize the shadows or the AO of the rock. And if you want, you can make it slightly blue, maybe not so saturated, but have slightly bluer shadows, and that's gonna add to the realism and make it look like if you have a sunny day or something like that, your shadows would generally be more blue. What you can also do is you can hue shift it to like green, so now it actually looks like we have moss growing in between the cracks of the rocks, maybe more of a yellow color there. So doing something like that is pretty cool. Just going to save this, and this is how you update your maps in UE4. So oops, in UE4 we have our rocks, and if you want to update your map, you just simply right click on it and just say re-import, and it's going to give us, it's not going to give us our green. So if that, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't work, you just hit import and just import the diffuse again, and it's going to ask you if you want to overwrite it. Just say yes, yes all. You might have to save your material again because it might screw up. And there we go. So now we can see that we've added some green to our rocks, and it actually looks like they look like a bunch of mossy rocks. So it definitely play around with it. This texture definitely isn't done. You could add more layers to your diffuse. This is just the base diffuse texture. You can add stuff like moss and all kinds of really fun stuff growing in the rocks and stuff like that. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this tutorial.